Today we get to look at something which is quite fun, I think. There's a YouTuber called James Hoffmann. He is a coffee YouTuber, but he has an immense commitment, I suppose, to the bits that he does in his videos. His latest video takes that to an absolute extreme, taking the coffee advert for Delonghi with Brad Pitt, and he is recreating that as a collaboration with Fiverr to demonstrate how you can use Fiverr as a platform to source crew and then go out and shoot an advert like this, for example. When you look at this ad, it is really nicely done, but there are still things that I would nitpick about it. And indeed, James's video, he was nitpicking on some of the commercial choices in it. So commercials is what I do. I work on all kinds of different projects, run a production company. Usually I am directing or I am acting as director of photography, depending on what the project is. But director of photography is my kind of, that's my yin. So that's what I like doing. And I know how this has gone. This is working with lots of people in a room who want it to be obvious to the lowest possible common denominator of someone who might just, out of the corner of their eye, see this video and immediately want to understand, yes, it's Brad Pitt and yes, he's getting coffee. So you can, if you've been in my, you can imagine the conversations that have gone on where someone's gone, oh, I don't know if it's obvious enough. Can we make it more obvious? As James mentioned, gets taken to an extreme, perhaps, where you have this just constantly, he's hanging out of his bag there. It's in the shot just here on the left. You know, it's everywhere. It doesn't need to be like that. Now, James did call out a couple of bits of the cinematography on this, you know, the way that it was shot, the anamorphic lens flare. You can see you've got lovely little bits of anamorphic bokeh going on in the background there. So kudos to James for calling out all of the beautiful stuff that was in that video, alongside some of the ridiculous stuff. Now, the purpose of this is for me just to get into comparing the two. So I've taken the liberty of cutting the two ads together so that the pacing on James's one matches the pacing on Brad's one a little bit more closely, and then we're comparing like apples for apples when we're going through the shots. It does mean that I've lost some of the shots from James's one. Let's take a look at that now. Immediately we do have that little anamorphic flare going on. Still got that there, just there. It's all nice. I do wonder what lens they actually used for that. I wonder whether it was a little cheeky, maybe it was a little cheeky Helios or something, because you've got kind of the little swirliness in the bokeh. I'll be interested to find out. All of these are pretty comparable. That's cool until we get to that shot with the hand, and then they're off riding at sunset. Fresh coffee beans. Now, I think when I look at this, let's get a more flattering frame up. There are a couple of things that jump out to me, and it's mostly to do with how hot the background is. Now, the background is super hot in both, but because the windows in the shot that they're in with James are so much bigger, we're getting that hot frame all the way across, whereas in the shot with Brad, it's just the hot windows, and then we have an area of dark over to the left, which balances everything out a little bit more nicely. Gives us a little bit more interest with, you know, these little bits of practical going on, and it doesn't feel quite as on the edge. And I think that also James is getting a lot less return to his face just there. So they're not wrapping the light around. He's not getting a key getting into his eyes and his face just there. It's all just coming in on the side. Now, this is really hard to do, especially when it's that hot. You know, look at that. It's a building across the other side of the road, which is pretty light color, you know, maybe it's white, and it's getting hit with direct sunlight. You're not going to be able to compensate for that particularly easily. There are a couple of ways that you can do it. One is to get a really big light in on James. Now, the only saving grace here, I would say, is that actually, if you look at James in the shot just there, he's not in a particularly wide shot, so you could bring in a light fixture quite close and probably do enough to actually make it work. Here, it felt like they're trying to do it gracefully, and looking at some of the setups that they had, you know, they got a big curtain of diff they've got in, just some fabric, and I don't know whether they had a 600D. I think it was a 600D on this. But that kind of level of light, you've got to be a little bit more bold using it to get it to wrap around and bring it in a little bit closer. As a DP, I'm always trying to get the light further away to make it fall off, look natural and graceful. But here, you can't really get away with it like that. You've got to be a little bit more definite with how you're using it. Also, in the background, there's nothing you're going to do that's going to compensate for light of that level. So the way that you can get around it is scheduling. That is the best way of getting around it. It's also the hardest way to get past your AD. If you could schedule this so that you didn't have the light hitting the windows in the back just there, making it all look like it's on fire, then you could easily shoot this with a much lower power fixture. Another alternative would be to net the windows. Nets, not many people use them anymore, but it's a good way of just taking the level down. So really big single net across the back might be tricky with a window that size, but you could probably get away with it. You know, there's a pole in the middle, so you could probably use 2 big 12 by nets. But then you're in the spectrum of having 12 bys, and that's, you know, more crew, more grip, harder to wrangle, a little bit more specialist as well. Not everyone is just going to have those on their truck, but if you can get them, great. Or ND gel. ND gel, difficult to work with. You'd have to have someone come in and lay it on the windows. It can look really naff if you don't get it on right. And also, you start to have to be really careful. One of the things that I think, I don't want to take away from what they've done, but one of the things when you're looking at something like this, if you're really trying to get this shot perfect and spend all the time on it, then sure, bigger lights, ND gel, a net, scheduling, all of those things. If you're just trying to get the shot that looks the same as the one that's in the Brad ad, then yeah, you're in the ballpark there. You know, it's framed roughly the same. In the Brad Pitt one, they've obviously gone completely blown out as well, but they have managed to bring around his face just a little bit more. You can kind of see where that line is down here on Brad Pitt's face. On James, it's more like here, but it's a much softer wraparound that they've got going on. So I think bolder, more in the face. Got to be careful with the glasses as well. Glasses were, goodness me, absolute nightmare. But in those ways, you can make it just a little bit more graceful. And that's what we're after. That's what we do. Driving off. This one's actually a really close analogy. Good work on time of day and all the rest of it. I think my only criticism of this is exposure. It feels like they're going for trying to make the bike exposed rather than exposing all the hot highlights like the street and, by the postbox just there. I'd say drop it down a little bit. It's just a little bit crunched. Could be a grade thing, I believe they shot this on red. I'm not sure which red, but probably has plenty of latitude. There's a couple of things you can do if you're not feeling like you're getting it quite. They had some bounce, bring some bounce in, and then just let them go off, because once they're, out of the initial couple of feet, you're not going to be doing anything. And that way you've taken care of it. You've appeased the agency. If the agency on set and they're saying, we need a more definite look on the bag, and indeed here you have black on black with the white label. In the case of Brad's bag, it is a lovely, lovely brown paper bag, and that stands out a bit against his, costume, against the jacket and the bag, but that's a good point as well, like styling and how all of the different elements are working together. That will have been something that is thought about, and it does stand out. So on these shoots, having someone there who is making sure that all of that makes sense is also imperative. Yeah, definitely bring this one down. You could get it looking almost the same, just with a slightly lower level. And I think save the highlights. You could have bought them up in post if you really had to, I reckon, just to pop them a little bit. But if this is gone, it just looks a little bit too hot. This is nice. I think, again, I'm going to talk to shape for this, and I know that they shot this outside, so harder to do. You can see in James's glass actually, big tell just here. Got the light coming in from this side just here. You've got all of that just filling in his face. I think the biggest difference to take away from the two is shaping and layering in, and the luxury of having the location. In the version on the bottom with Brad Pitt, you have lots of light coming in from the window. It's super hot, it's blowing out, it's gone. But they're kind of going for that, you know, like hazy, sunny, bright feel. But he's still got enough light on him that you can see him. But it is coming in from one direction, and he has a downside. It's not all super, super bright, and it's not all super, super dark either. It is shaped off and sculpted. The shot for James, he's getting flat light. His entire face, everything is, you know, take it in there. This side is the same as this side. He's got a little bit down under his chin. His arm's the same. Look at Brad Pitt. He's got light coming in this side, and then just here, it's actually darker, way darker than his highlight along there and the highlight along his hair. Now, the same will be true if we just rewind a little bit of the bikes as well. Different bikes, different look. Obviously a much blacker bike on the bottom, but you can see the contrast from the light coming in through the windows versus everything, you know, just firing in. You've got light coming from here, you've got stuff bouncing up off the ground, you've got the sky, which is going to be over the top just here, just filling everything in, very soft down, kind of toplit look. And it just doesn't have the structure. And that structure, the light, the shade, the contrast, the shapes, they're doing a good job with the framing. If I was to overanalyze one step further, I would say in the version with Brad Pitt, it's not a straight tilt up and slight boom up. It's actually a pull in. So as we look at what's going on here, it starts maybe a little bit low, but not super low. And then it just tilts up and moves forward and arcs around somewhat. We don't have the light coming in from the back. We only have flat light coming in from the front. We don't have any of the contrast. We don't have any of the shaping just there. So all you've got at that point is framing and depth of field, and then anything you're doing for set dressing. Funky orange chair. Love it. So there are things in there which can draw your eye, no question about it. But when you're taking away the purposeful pull through, when you're taking away that rack focus on the longer focal length, when you're taking away the backlighting, when you're taking away the shaping on your subject, then you suddenly are left with the more literal approach. Look at these two, recognize the difference between them, and then think, if I was to approach this again, where would I be looking to spend my budget? And this is going to boil down to budget a lot of the time. Am I going to get a funky location which has something that looks like this? Maybe you can get one, but maybe it's too far away and you can't get all the crew over there, and you need your crew to be able to work in a certain area so that you can make your day. Okay, well, maybe I'm going to spend the time shaping the lighting. Okay, maybe you can do that. Maybe you're outside. Maybe shaping the light means you need to bring in a 20 by 20 frame of negative, and you're going to need more crew. You're going to need bigger stands. It takes longer to set up, it takes up a lot more space. You know, maybe they're in an area where they just can't put that up because they're close to a road, or, you know, whatever it is, there are going to be limitations. So you need to work through those limitations and think, well, in the time that I have, with the location that I've got, what are the things that I could do that would make this work a little bit better? I think for me, perhaps I would have taken the light inside the shop and kind of fired it through, so you got light coming through from the back, sort of hitting the coffee bean bag and edge lighting this guy coming in, just so that it was less flat to camera. Moving on, we have more riding shots. Hard to make the riding shots really purposeful. And I look at this and I can instantly see the reason that they don't quite feel as purposeful as the shots for Brad Pitt on the bottom. And it's to do with the road, actually. So imagine that, and if you've never gone out and done car shoots, it's hard to visualize things like this. But imagine that you've got this setup. Well, for Brad Pitt on the bottom, we're way further away from him and on a longer lens. And that means that it's going to look different. You're going to get a different sense of speed. You're going to be able to get different perspective, between your subject and the background and the foreground. And then you're also going to be able to do moves where you kind of sweep around them and stuff. And the reason for that is, James is closing a road at Beachy Head. It's just got 2 lanes. So we're not on a 5-lane highway able to get a lane or 2 away from the subject, able to then go on, they're probably on 35 for that shot with Brad Pitt just there. And that's going to feel totally different from being on what is probably a much, much wider lens, much, much closer for the shot on the top. Now that kind of difference can seem minor. You think, well, you just could still achieve the shots. That's absolutely fine. It's one of the hardest things that I have to do when I spec out a automotive shoot. I look at roads that we can get. I look at locations that we can go to. I look at even like tracks and things that you can go to. There are various test tracks around the UK where you can do quite a lot of shooting, and you don't have to worry about road closure and that kind of thing. But when you look at them, you often find you're going to end up with a shot like that because you can't get far enough away from your subject vehicle. But it is a real challenge. Now, when you're also shooting, as I believe they were on one of the Bickers action vehicles, they had just the gimbal handheld. There's nice shots, and then there's like absolute precision. And if you're after absolute precision, it's really hard to do with someone holding a gimbal, because I speak as someone who's done it. I've done my fair share of challenging shoots where we don't have the kit to do it the way that I'd like. I have the luxury now of using some of the elaborate kit, vehicle rigs, black arms. We've got a motor crane and all that kind of jazz. It is different when you have the ability to place the camera, have it independent of any human, and then just minutely control it and know that all of the arms stabilizing, all the rest of it. So you can get like the vibe of the Brad Pitt ad from, James riding off just here. It's just top shot. But when you get down to the minutiae of really accurate moves and arcing around and changing heights and all of that kind of stuff, it's just not something you can do efficiently or safely in some respects with someone holding the gimbal. You're limited on speed. Bickers action vehicles, it's all going to be risk assessed. You've got road closures, you've got professionals who they're doing it. Do not, whatever you do, go off and shoot sitting on the top of a car. That is a mad idea. If we're just looking at the similarities between these two shots, yeah, they didn't get the sun, they didn't get the, glorious 5-lane highway to shoot on. In the James version, you start on the coffee beans, you pull up past the petrol pump, and then you alight on our 2 protagonists there and the Monster Munch. On the Brad version, it works the opposite way. So you start on Brad and you come down to the coffee beans. Nothing really to complain about too much on that. You do see gimbal wobble again. If we just look at the difference between the dolly shot and the gimbal shot just there, you see the gimbal does the little gimbal perspective shift. Again, we're doing a slightly more linear move. It feels a little bit like we start in on the bag just here, and then we pull out and back from the handlebars and up, and then try and hold it there, but inevitably you get the bobbling around. Really hard to make a gimbal shot feel perfectly like a dolly shot. Much, much quicker to execute. Just doesn't have the weightiness. And also I think we're probably on a wider lens here for the same shot. I think it's just a blocking thing. You're trying to block 2 people who have to interact with each other. It's going to feel different from blocking one person who is moodily standing and pumping petrol into their bike while looking all cool. You're not going to be able to put them in the same positions in order to get the same shaping on their face. It's just a different shot. So yeah, you do what you can. And that's one of those shots that I was talking about with the precision of movement, just being able to kind of arc around. You're overtaking the rider, but then you're also pulling around to the front of him a little bit as well. Love this. Did a really decent job of, having moody shadows and passing behind foreground elements just here. This feels pretty similar. Brad Pitt's actually wider on this. Super hot outside the windows for James. Something to call out here, difference in lighting for product. So look at this from a commercial point of view, and do a lot of shoots where the product will be the thing that they really, the client that is, they really want that product to be looking good and obvious in shot. Now, this is not selling the grinder just here, but you have got some lighting on it. You can see the shape of it. It looks pretty good. The Delonghi is a little bit different. It is getting much more soft frontal push, just so you can see the shaping on it. So you can see like the metal. You can see a little bit of glossiness to the finish. You got that kind of soft fall off of light across the whole thing, and then the harsh edge light coming in from the right hand side. You know, big. That'll be a big HMI or something booking in, because yeah, it's not going to. Well, it could be okay. You could be bouncing the sunlight in. Could be bouncing the sunlight in, but it's probably a big HMI just blasting in and taking care of all of the side of it. But it is really considered. You know, they're looking at this and they want the product to feel like it's the focal point of the shot for them. Just there, Brad's coming in. He's walked past. He's getting his coffee beans out. But we want to be looking at this because we haven't seen it for the whole ad. Imagine selling that as a concept to a client. How many clients will go for this? We're not going to see your product for basically the entire advert, okay? But we do have Brad Pitt, and he does have fresh coffee beans, so it's not all bad. But when we get to this bit, we're going to see it. Don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So like the old story of Pulp Fiction and the execs being dismayed that John Travolta's character's going to die. Spoiler alert, you've had enough time. And then I think it was Quentin Tarantino said, oh, don't worry, he's alive at the end. Oh, okay, that's great. So like, he is dead, but the last scene you see him in, he's alive. We'll sell it. So here, it's the only shot we've had so far of this machine, so it better be nice. Gets his beans out. It's a much softer light on him now. You know, you compare, just think about Brad Pitt now. Compare the shot just here. You've got hard light coming into the side of that machine. We've got that hard flare coming in. Then when we cut to this angle, it is a much more gentle, soft light that is catching on his face, which is being brought in. You know, it's lighting him nicely. You can make out his features. It's still low key, you know, he's not super lit just there, but it's enough to really make out his features. And it's not just one side of his face. That's the interesting thing. You've actually got like light going down, but enough that you get both sides, you know? So you're seeing a little bit of the eye, a little bit of the face just there. Very cool. For James, he's way more down. Way more down. We've got a really hot window in the background, which is not a million miles off what Brad Pitt's got in the background there, but his has got more breakup of leaves and things. I would want a little bit more return on James, just for matching the two shots. You know, stylistically, do whatever you want, but I think a little bit more return. And again, it's kind of the return, but it's also his body position. So if we were just lighting into his face, that would be a little bit flat. So I think if he was turned a little bit more, and perhaps we weren't quite as low angle just here, and we're a little bit further back, so you can get more of the shape that Brad has on his face on James. Yeah. Coffee bag comes out, goes down. The bouncing shot. This one's interesting because I think, going back to what James was commenting on when he did the initial reaction video, all of the stuff that bounces out on the bottom shot, I think it kind of comes down to scheduling and time. I think this was just one of those shots it's hard to do in the way that you kind of envisage it in your head, with the coffee beans going in and it looking glorious and then not flying everywhere. When you get to the last part of the day and you're there and you're trying to make your day, trying to get your shots done, and some coffee beans bounce out, and you try it 5 or 6 times and they keep bouncing out, there's no way of viably doing it within the schedule that you got. You could keep doing the same thing over and over again. Eventually you would get lucky. Or you could just say, well, we'll kick it off down to post. Now I look at this and I think, well, that little one that just flew out just there, it's a super quick job just to comp that out. In fact, let's do it. Let's find the original. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it for you, Brad. Don't worry. Quickest way for me to do this right now. Boom. Ooh. Yeah, if I do that, and then if I freeze frame this, and then if I'm on top layer and I bring in an alpha channel output, and then I just put a mask around, yeah, just put a mask around that. Super rough mask. Eesh. Let's see. Oh yeah, and invert the mask. Haha. There we go. Boom. Fixed it. I mean, obviously, I haven't fixed it very well. You'd need to spend some time and actually not cut off half the coffee beans just there. And you probably want to feather the edges and all of that other good stuff. Yeah. You can make it a lot neater, is the point, I think, with this. I can totally see on a commercial shoot kicking that particular problem off down the road, assuming that that wasn't a pickup day where you were just in the studio and you had tons of time to do it and Brad Pitt wasn't there and you didn't have the whole crew there and all the rest of it. Brad Pitt probably wasn't there then, they were doing that anyway. Yeah, I think I would definitely, under a pressured circumstance, just say, we can fix that in post. Now, I have the luxury of doing that. You know, I work with a production company, I run a production company, and I know what is possible when we get to post-production. So when I'm talking to a client on set and I'm director of photography, and there's an issue, you know, like we can't get the mic in somewhere because it'll be in shot, I just go, right, well, what do we need to do to fix that? Do we need clean plate? Do we need this? And I can make the call and I can say, I know that that will be a 10-minute job, half an hour job, hour of meticulous comping to get something out. Whatever it is, I've got a pretty good handle on the technical side that goes into the back end to be able to say, just fix it in post. If it's going to cost us that much time and we're not going to make our day for the other important shots, we will kick that off to fix in post. It's not a sloppy way of doing it necessarily. It's more an appreciation of the fact that you will have situations where certain things just take far longer than you think. Happens a lot with product. So when you're doing lifestyle product shoots, I'm going off topic here quite grievously, but in lifestyle product, you want to get it feeling kind of like this. You know, you've got a nice glorious house and you've got your coffee machine and you want people to look at it and go, that's what I want to do that. I want to go and ride my bike around and pick up some lovely fresh coffee beans from Honduras and you know, they've just been roasted and they've only just got them in and they do seasonal stuff and it's all I want that sunset and then I come back and I got my machine and I want to sit there and drink. You want people to feel that, but when you get to the location you're doing the shoot, what the client wants, they do want all of that. Kind of, you know, as the creative they've been sold on, they're there, but they need the machine to work in a certain way. And sometimes these products don't work in the way that you necessarily expect them to. So frequently the product won't do something as cleanly as you would like. So you've got to do a bunch of takes, you know, when it's pouring the coffee, it'll spit bits out all over the place. When it's when it's being emptied out or when you're pouring things in like that, it just looks messy and you have to spend ages just finessing it, and the talent have trouble using it. That's a classic. So it can be something as simple as an actor having to pick up something and not cover the brand label. This is just a jam jar. I don't know why I got the jam jar there. drink water out of jam jars. So without covering the label, so every time they pick it up, they've got to pick it up in a certain way, make it look natural and not have the label covered, can actually take way longer than you'd think. So when you start off and you're thinking, oh yeah, I can just knock these kind of shoots out, actually you can't, because you're sitting there, people are in Video Village and going, we need to see more of the label. Can we do that again? You go, okay. And you chat to your talent, you're just like, oh, it doesn't look natural now. Okay. So you go and talk to the talent and you get them to kind of change their grip. Maybe you've got to flip over to the other side, and then you've got to change your lighting, and now your shot's not as nice as it was, because you've had to compromise on the lighting and the framing in order to make sure that you can get it natural for the talent, because if they look like they're picking it up and it's all awkward, then that's not good either. So all of these things start to eat into your time. And then it'll go on to another shop and it's like, I don't know, applying the product or using the product and it doesn't look as good, or the talent has trouble getting it to work in the way that you want it to. You would be shocked how often it is the case that someone finds it hard to do something because they've never done it before. They haven't always necessarily done this process before. Like people doing cookware or anything like that. You'd think it would be easy because you only see like... professional chefs on TV who are no. The talent that you've got that day isn't that fast with a knife, so it all looks a little bit uneven, and you need to find a different angle. You need to try and disguise it. Veering way off topic. The point is, it's much harder than a casual viewer might imagine to get all of these things working. On the face of it, absolutely easy. That shouldn't have sneaked through. That should have been picked up in post. Wasn't picked up in post, so we can riff on it now. I have to say, I think that the lighting on James's shot here is one of the nicer lit shots in the whole advert. And I think when you get into this is in a location, it's indoors, and they can control the light more. And a close-up shot is always easier to control the light on the close-up than it is on a wide. So when we get to this shot, suddenly the lighting feels much more intentional than it did on some of the wider shots, because it's more possible to manage that lighting when you're on a smaller scale. I think if I was being nitpicky and I was on the Delonghi shoot, I would have wanted the logo looking a teensy bit cleaner, or at least I would have expected someone to ask for it to look a little bit cleaner. And that is a case of, do I have a silver side? Yeah, maybe something like that. Just bringing something like this in close to a reflective, ooh, can I do it? Here we go. Yeah, so I've got all kinds of, you can see what I'm lighting myself with there. I've got a grid on it. Ta-da! Made it cleaner. So bringing in something, it can be neg, it can be white. So with something reflective like this, you'd probably want white or grey, or something that isn't completely black so that you can see some of the shape in there. You might even go fancy and have like a bit of diffusion gel with, I don't know, an Astera tube or some other light source just gradiating down through it, so you get that nice soft gradient across it, make it look all sumptuous. I'm not saying it looks terrible, I just think that within its structure just there, kind of around here, it gets a little bit messy, and you can see like, I don't know, window light, and then a bit of something else just here, which might be Brad Pitt, or not Brad Pitt, it'll be whoever is being the hand just there, in there a bit. We don't have a milk pouring shot just here, instead we have more over the top with the grounds going everywhere. Oof, the OCD goes nuts. And I think that this is the closest that we get to lighting on James being similar to the lighting on Brad. I will say that actually Brad here doesn't have the little reflective edge light through his cheek, which he has had at several points through the advert. The only criticism I'd have there is people with glasses. God damn it, why do you wear glasses, They are casting a shadow. Shadow from glasses is like my bête noire. It's like a pet hate of mine, because I see it, on myself all the time, and goodness knows, maybe I'm avoiding it here, maybe I'm not. There are a couple of things that you can do to get around it, but ultimately it's always a challenge. So in this shot, it's quite a hard shadow going across James's eye just there. You can really see, this coming in here. You can see the edge of his glasses in just there. To a certain extent, you're never going to avoid it completely. because you'll have it there, but it would be more diffused and less obvious if using a bigger source, or if you're at a different angle, you can disguise it because it's not flat onto the eyeball. Where it crosses over someone's eye just there, that is a no-no. I can't have it unless it's for a real stylistic reason within a shot and you want it to look that way. Always avoid it. So the light is coming in a little bit high up here, kind of from this angle, coming in and pushing across, kicking that shadow across his eyes. Brad's got pretty flat light here. If we were doing what they were doing, you can bring it a little bit further around, get something into his eyes maybe. I have to say, what is up with dead eyes just there? That is some willful avoidance of a catchlight in Brad Pitt's eyes. I'd have thought that this moment, maybe they're saving it. Maybe they're saving the catchlight for when he has his sip of coffee, and then it's like it's given his spark back. Ah, yes, perfetto. So I think that he's got a catchlight in his eyes now. Between the two, the background for James is way hotter. We've got lovely out of focus, anamorphic bokeh sea of trees and things in the background just there. This feels a little bit harsher. Fairly easy to disguise something like that. A small frame, a small net outside, knock it down a bit, or just get a bunch of foliage, just wang it in the background, break it up a little bit, put it on some C-stands, have it waving around a bit if you want. That would have helped because it is distracting next to his face. This is so bright that then it doesn't quite feel like he's seated in the scene enough. They're doing a good job of keeping the motivation of the light on the correct side. We're wrapping from the side that we see the highlights in. Up here, that's lovely. If that could be the level across there. And I think I'd perhaps like just a little bit more level in the background. I'm all for the kind of down mood, but I think when you've got an area of highlights so bright just here, the rest of it should be elevated a little bit. And this is a very hard thing to do, because when we directors of photography, cinematographers, when we come into this, we have a limit of how much light we have to play with within a scene. And then the ratios have to sit within the amount of light that we have. So we need to see the people, and in a certain way, they could be silhouetted, but we still need to have some sense of them. And then we need to work with like the window that's in this shot and all the rest of it. So knowing that the window is that bright, I either need to bring the window down, or I need to bring the level in the environment up a bit. Now, this feels like got to a level where we're happy with the way it looks on James, but the window's just gone nuts. So need to control that window, need to bring it down. Or we need to boost up the levels in the location. Now, I'll often go out with quite a big lighting package, so it's easy to say, just book more light up into the environment. If you don't have that luxury, then you're back to scheduling, or you're back to knocking the light level down, and you can get away with much smaller fixtures. This isn't a sensitivity thing either. A lot of people conflate like having it was the A7S, back in the day, the high sensitivity camera. That's going to solve what we're not going to need as much lighting. We're going to be able to get away with smaller fixtures. Absolutely you can, but you've got to control the ratios within your shot, and sometimes that means there's something outside which is way brighter than any of the lights that you got, unless you've got bigger fixtures. So even with a sensitive camera, it doesn't get you out of this particular predicament. And if they were shooting this on the red as well, it's got latitude in there, but we probably can't save all of the highlights on something that bright. So just knock them down a bit, just bring it down, or adjust your frame. Twist around a bit. I get that we want to have the window in the background to be the same as what's happening with Brad just there, but Brad's getting so much more light. If I was critiquing, the accuracy of this, the framing, not the framing, the blocking often ends up being basically the same, give or take. But the framing often ends up being quite different, and the lighting in the frame ends up being different. So more fill for James, way more fill, and what they're doing to give shape and contrast to Brad is putting that edge light on. So we've got the edge light on Brad just here, and that's what's doing the shape for him. Apart from that, he's super flat, you know, this side, it's just flat. James, way more shapely. It's more my jam, you know, the top. I dig it, but if we're trying to replicate what's going on just there, just go for a big soft push, get a 2 meter diffusion frame, take it back a little bit, push a diffused light through it, you know, if you've got a big LED panel, or if you're working with 600Ds, say, you know, booklight it. This is where you start to eat up all your light as well. If you're doing that fill like that, and you're just edging it around and making it soft and all of those things, you start to fritter away your light level, so you can't compete with the crazy sun in the background. And then you've got to take that down, you know, get a net in front of it, get some foliage in front of it, something, because otherwise it just starts to take control. I think the nice thing about the shot with Brad here, and I don't think it's perfect, by the way, I think it is very commercial. But if we're talking about commercial, you know, it's nice commercial. There's still bright spots of stuff going on in the background. So it isn't like it's two-dimensional. It isn't like everything is really down or really flat. There's still contrast. There's still shape. There's this wonderful patina of bokeh in the background, which we're not getting so much with James. We're getting out of focus areas, but we're not getting that beautiful patina of bokeh. And something that could have helped that is, you know, seeing a little bit more of what's going on over here in the kitchen. Hitting this with a little bit more light, you know, getting something on a menace arm, or a little, even, you know, what could be used for it? Just a little C-stand grip arm, get it out over the top, tape a LED mat to the ceiling just there, just get some shape on these things so that they can go out to bokeh. Take down this window just here so that the bokeh becomes a little bit more apparent, and then we get more to this kind of thing where we have the shape of stuff, you know, we've got the machine in the back, we got these bits, we got some different cabinets, and we can see the lines, but we're losing some of that for James, unfortunately. And again, we can see a little bit of the light in his eyes because he's got glasses on and Brad Pitt doesn't. So, you know, score on for Brad. But ultimately James wins because Brad Pitt does not have a bripe. I think the best thing to come out of this would be having Brad Pitt try to recreate the end of the James advert with a bripe. That would be, I think, peak coffee YouTuber banter, getting Brad Pitt with a bripe. Massive respect for pulling off the bit, James. Would love to have a coffee with you at some point. All of my nitpicking notwithstanding, I think it was a fantastic effort, and the whole thing comes across with that very British air. Good work.